welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. Every week, I have the privilege of hosting a business communication expert. By listening to our conversation, you will get tips and strategies that will boost your business, and so will I. This week, I'm very privileged to have another special guest, and I'll introduce her now. My guest today, Nadia Bilchik, helps you, and these are her own words, maximize your impact every time you communicate. Hey, that's what I want to do, and I'm sure it's what you want to do as well. Nadia Bilchik's keynotes and seminars are designed to build self-confidence and personal presence. She focuses on developing the verbal and nonverbal communication skills needed to become more impactful and persuasive. Nadia draws on her vast experience at the front line of broadcasting, and I've seen her on television many times. She has anchored for MNET TV South Africa, her home country originally, as well as hosting a variety of shows for CNN International and Weekend Passport on CNN. During her career, she has interviewed many key political figures and entertainers, such as Nelson Mandela and George Clooney. Clearly, Nadia has shared her extraordinary mastery of communication with small and large audiences and with individual clients, both in person and on camera. So, as you can tell, we're very fortunate today that Nadia Bilchik will share her mastery of communication with us. Nadia, hello.
Hello, Bill. And right now, we're talking about mastering your virtual communication skills. So I think never before has it been more important that we understand not only the essence of good communication, right? But how do we do it in a virtual world? Because normally you and I may have been doing this interview in person, and doing it virtually really shifts things, doesn't it?
Yes, in fact, that was something I was going to ask you because you said not too long ago that we are all on TV now, not just
Right.
the professional broadcasters such as you and many others we're familiar with, admire, and love to hear and see. You've said we're all on TV now. Why? Because we're not having the in-person audiences for speeches, for seminars, even for coaching. And so we've, all of us by necessity, to get our messages and our instruction across, have needed to learn what you and I are doing now, Zoom or Skype, or maybe we're doing it by telephone. So please give us your tips on how we can be effective in our online training, both visually and vocally.
So the first thing, Bill, is mindset. One has to accept that on these virtual platforms, you actually have to show up as you would in person, which means simply put your camera on. I can't tell you how many times I'm in a large meeting and at least half the attendees don't have their camera on. Now, obviously, if you've really got a reason not to have the camera on, you're driving or you are in a situation where it's really untenable, or you're breastfeeding your baby, fine, don't have the camera on. I laughed because we were doing a big CNN reunion the other day, and the tips were always have your camera on, except if you're in your lingerie. Don't go on camera in your lingerie. But
Yes, let me mention that a minute, please. I think you and I both are well aware, as all of our viewers and listeners are, that clothing styles have changed so much over the last 20 years.
definitely,
I
but
can remember
still,
so well.
lingerie.
Excuse me, go ahead.
And I was going to say, yes, they have changed. And, business casual is in. And just because anything goes doesn't mean it should.
That's right. I can remember so well the very first time, I guess maybe it was 15 years ago, that I got on an airplane for the first time as a passenger not wearing a tie, because up until that time, it was decorum that men wore ties and women might wear suits and heels. And now I sometimes say whimsically, I hope the guy sitting beside me has on a full undershirt, you know?
Well, now you hope he has on a full mask.
Yes,
That
yes.
would
Now
really help.
it's a
But
mask.
so the first thing, and really it's an important one, is have your camera on. And as if you were in a business meeting, looking fully present and attentive, look fully present and attentive. You wouldn't go into a boardroom meeting and put your head on the desk, and not having your camera on or slouching or not looking present is really tantamount to that. The other thing, and I keep stressing this, is eye line, okay? So I'm looking at you into the camera. Can you see? Do you
I
feel like
see
I'm
you
looking at
quite
you?
well.
Okay. So you want to look into the camera, which is counterintuitive, because if I look down at you where I see you on my computer screen, I can look like that. Or if I'm looking up, I look like that.
It's
So
one
what
of the
we,
biggest adjustments we have to
right,
make, because our natural tendency, and we've been taught since we were kids, when you're talking with somebody, make eye contact, look at them. But if you do, as you say, then probably you're going to be looking down, and that gives the appearance of not paying attention, which you certainly don't want to do.
exactly. So I spend, when I'm doing my interviews or I'm doing a big Zoom meeting with a panelist or a moderator from a company, I always spend a few moments with them first, just looking at their camera and where they're looking. So eye line, most important. And you just said it. I mean, I am talking to Bill Lampton, who is a master communicator. So we are sharing information and tips to you together. The second thing is lighting. So what I see is I see people who have a huge window behind them. Well, that's lovely, except they look like a silhouette or a cardboard cutout. So if you notice, both you, Bill, and I have our lights in front of us. And if you've got a third light, I have a light that is actually on my background to give it some light and illuminate it, even though this is a virtual background. So number one is eye line. Number two is lighting, lighting, lighting. Find an old lamp somewhere in your house, put it in front of your computer. I've got a lot of these on my YouTube, maximizing your virtual presence, a lot of visual tips and ideas of how you can do this very reasonably without having to buy professional equipment. And then sometimes you want to raise your computer up so that you're not looking down at the person and then into the camera. And then, you know, like you've done, you've got your beautiful study in the background. So that looks very professional. It represents you in the best possible way. I've got a virtual studio, which is part of my brand as a former television person, now teaching and training and speaking, but I still have a studio.
I'll comment on both of those. Lighting is very important, as you say, because it either enhances or it detracts. And if the lighting is too much of a glare, as you've suggested, because it's placed in the wrong spot, or if it's too dark, that's very difficult for us uh, to adjust to. And I like so much what you say about camera presence. And the other thing that I know you would add, and so I'll jump ahead. One of the things that I like to advise people, if they're going to be, we're calling it TV because in a way it is TV. Anytime you're going to be on camera, I'm afraid that so many people have the impression that, gosh, you know, I need to get a broadcast voice. I need to sound like somebody professional. Fact of the matter is, people want to hear you as you are, and leave the broadcast voice to the people who have it. Every person has a distinctive voice. I've often said that our voice, I like to say, it's our vocal signature, because you and I know, Nadia, if a friend calls you that you haven't talked to in maybe 15 years, and after their first sentence, they identify who they are, you can tell them, I knew who it was already. And that's one of the
Yes, yes,
wonderful things.
yes.
Our voice is our treasure, isn't it?
That is so true. And I think you're hitting on something so important, which is authenticity. But there's a fine line, you know, in this age of at-home working and seeing your real house and being natural and not being perfectly groomed. And I understand that. You don't have to dress full suit and jacket and tie. But I'm urging people just to have standards, some kind of standards. So if you are in your bedroom, you're in New York, you're in a loft, you're working from home, and you're working in your bedroom because you only have a bedroom and a bathroom and a kitchen all in one, make sure the bed is made and there's just some neatness so that I'm not so distracted by something disheveled. And so we okay with being natural and authentic, just ensure that that authenticity isn't distracting. Which brings us to my four things, because I spoke about eyeline and I spoke about lighting and I spoke about your background. You don't want your background to be cluttered. You want your background to enhance the overall way you come across. And then the fourth thing really is the verbal and nonverbal, which you teach so well and is so important in all of this, which is that you don't need to be speaking to make a statement. So if I am on my phone like this during a call, it's speaking. You don't need to be vocalizing to communicate. And just be aware that if you do have to answer the door for a moment and you put your camera and you have a photo, rather have a photo of yourself than just have your name. And it is perfectly okay to write into the chat, "Hi, apologies, leaving for 5." You know, the same rules that apply in person apply online. And we are going to be having more and more online meetings, online platforms. I mentioned to you earlier, we recently had 1,000 people join a CNN reunion. It was absolutely wonderful. And I had hosted earlier one of the breakout sessions. I've already been in touch with 2 of the people from my breakout session. One guy I'm actually hiring to do some work for me. And one other person that I contacted has hired me. So don't underestimate the importance of follow-up after a virtual call, because it's unnatural. Think about this. You and I, we're doing the interview in a space, and then we have coffee afterwards and we chat, and I find out about your life and you find about my life. There's a much more organic, natural way of connecting, having a conversation and then collaborating. We have to put so much more effort in now, right? You have to be very conscious. When I am on a call, I write down all the people on the call, and then I circle the people that I'm going to reach out to again. And again, this requires taking yourself off autopilot. It's not intuitive. For me, who's a natural extrovert, it's very intuitive to chat to somebody, to have a meeting, to let's go get coffee afterwards. None of that natural interaction is happening. So we have to be much more deliberate about the process.
Those are all good tips. And I want to get back to just underscore exactly what I meant about not trying to have a broadcast voice. I think the word that you and all top broadcasters recognize as a key is authenticity.
Mhm.
And that is, you don't need to pretend to be somebody else. People want you to be yourself. And we're not really in our online instruction, we're not really delivering a speech. What we ought to be doing is having a conversation with people and a good conversational tone. Very much the same as if you and I happen to bump into each other in the grocery store and we just chat. Nobody's grading us on how we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that we certainly want to have good language, good grammar, good diction, good pronunciation. But again, I go back to being authentic, because if you're not, people will, they can do just like they do on television. They can hit that off button pretty quickly.
So I think, and coming to a point with yourself. So in all of my programs, and I've actually just put together a 2-part program on maximizing your virtual presence. The first part has a lot to do with your relationship with yourself and confidence, because this medium is difficult. For a lot of people, interpersonal communication, as you well know, because you have mastered and taught it most of your career, is it's challenging for a lot of people. So it doesn't make it any easier just because you're online. So the first part of all communication, I say you want to light a fire. Part of all communication is how you feel about yourself. So in order to be authentic, you have to have ease. So Bill, I actually did my TEDx Emory talk on this very topic. It's called Own Your Confidence. And if anybody's interested, it's TEDx Emory, Nadia Bilchik. It was in 2019. And it's all very well for Bill and I to say to you, you need to be authentic. But I do give you some tips and techniques and really hardcore practical things you can do to shift from maybe feeling uncomfortable.
What would be one or two of those, Nadia?
The most important thing is to develop something called a positive emotional memory database. And that is when you start feeling nervous or you start feeling anxious, either before a high stakes online call or an in-person high stakes situation, the ability to access positive past memory creates a new neural pathway in the brain. And it's very effective in increasing your levels of testosterone and decreasing cortisol.
But one thing I would like to say along that line is that so many people, you and I will see sometimes on, if we were to Google the term stage fright, we're going to see some people on there who say we will cure your stage fright. I don't advise that. I don't promise that. What I want people to do is to control their stage fright. In fact, what I say is, the reason I say control instead of get rid of it, it's very good for us to have some maybe anxiety or tension. If you and I were to go into any kind of presentation, whether it's online or it's live, and we were just sort of ho-hum about it, our audience would be yawning, or they might even be getting out of there pretty quickly. It's not as, what you need to do is channel it. You don't get rid of it, but you channel it into a lively presentation.
That's so true. The famous saying, we don't teach the butterflies to go away, we teach them to fly in unison.
That's
and
right.
Part of owning your confidence is the physical and mental strategies to do that. And not everybody is naturally comfortable. And we don't expect, as you said, we don't expect everybody to be naturally comfortable. We don't look for perfection. But in an age of virtual communication, each and every person, if you're going to be effective, and it doesn't matter if you're a data scientist or a physician, a project manager, or a pharmacist, people have got to become comfortable enough using this medium that it doesn't detract or distract or deviate from the purpose of the conversation.
And one thing about it, we all recognize that our first efforts are not going to be as professional as our later.
Oh my gosh, isn't that true? I can tell you that when I did my first Zoom webinar, my technology just wasn't as smooth as it needed to be. But you know what's so interesting, and I always say this to people I coach and train and speak to, is people are very forgiving. I was very transparent and I was relaxed. I said, guys, I'm so sorry. I said, I never normally start again, because I said, there's no starting again. There's no rewind except on a television camera, right? But in life, there's no rewind. So I don't know what your tip is to people in presentations if they make a mistake, but I always say to them, just say, let me rephrase that. Or I've been live on CNN and made a mistake, and I just say, let me put that another way. And people really don't notice. I once called Czechoslovakia. I called it Czechoslovakia, not the Czech Republic. And it had become the Czech Republic in the 60s, and truly nobody noticed, except my mother. Of course, she noticed. But we make mistakes, and people don't view us with the microscopic lens we view ourselves. But the key and the tip, and I know I'm dying to hear what yours are, but I would say to people, just stay transparent. So on my webinar, where some of my technology and the slides weren't working, I just said, guys, I'm going to try once more. If it doesn't work, I'm going to move on. And I wanted to play my video and it didn't work, and I moved on. And the calls I got from people were mainly, thank you for your transparency, and thank you for showing us how to handle a situation that goes wrong. So people are forgiving. When they're not forgiving is if you get very flustered and very upset and angry and you don't just move on, or if you aren't transparent.
Yes, one of the things that I emphasize when I'm providing speech coaching, one of the first things we need to do is to change our view of audiences. Audiences, as you say, are very forgiving. And one of the points I make, Nadia, is that if Nadia is up in front of an audience, which you have been hundreds of times, there are a lot of those people out there, they're not going to be very critical. You know what they're thinking? They're thinking, I'm glad it's Nadia up there and not me.
What did Seinfeld say at a funeral? I'd rather be in the coffin than delivering the eulogy, right?
That's right. That was Jerry Seinfeld, I think, who
Yes,
came
that's
up
right.
with that.
And then I love, the reality of nervousness and making mistakes. And I had another thought there. We were talking about Jerry Seinfeld and just it's okay. We don't have to be perfect. But what I say to people, Bill, is don't not do it because you're so paralyzed.
Any
Because
one of us, Nadia, who ever watched Johnny Carson, we can remember that Johnny Carson was so great when he pulled a blooper. He made something out of it. He'd do a little soft shoe dance. He'd do a little tap the microphone to see if it was working.
right,
And it was almost making you wonder sometimes, does Johnny plan these mistakes? Because he handled them so skillfully.
Shirley
Laughed them off.
MacLaine, exactly. Shirley MacLaine said, if you can learn to laugh at yourself, you'll be forever amused. So yes, we make mistakes. Technology doesn't work, but a big part of our lives as we deal with the new normal and the reality of the virtual world is I'm really working with people in groups, as are you, to say you have to get comfortable enough. And it's also distracting for a lot of people. And I find in my seminars, Bill, people say they don't like seeing themselves. It's hard to see yourself because you tend to want to correct your hair, as I'm doing now, as I'm looking at myself. Whereas when you're in front of an audience, people, you can't see yourself. So there's a big difference between being self-aware, which I encourage, and self-conscious, which again is a sabotager or a saboteur. It's a derailer. We want you to come across as the best, most comfortable version of yourself and not get into a mindset or way of being that in any way is a saboteur.
You may be familiar with one of the video experts in Atlanta since you're in that area, Scott Williford. Scott and I have worked together on a couple of occasions. And one of the things he advises people when they're thinking about doing video, and I love this, and I think you will too, he says, get over yourself.
Well, get over yourself. And even you and I are having this conversation, but we like talking to each other, but we're doing it to give value to you who are watching or listening to us. So it's not really about us. It's how can what we know help you? And that's the goal. It's always the other. It's who is the audience? How can they benefit from hearing this? But if you are watching, listening, joining us, and you have had a moment that has been mortifying, really nobody looks at you with the microscopic lens you view yourself. They don't. And if you make a mistake, if you graciously apologize and move on, it's fine. So perfection does not exist, but the ability to speak up in a meeting, the ability to show up, particularly now, and that's my emphasis, because I can't see us going back to the boardroom as we know it in the immediate future. So right now, this really is a medium that everybody has to get comfortable with. That's what I'm suggesting. Get comfortable enough.
Excellent. I know, Nadia, that so many who have been with us on video or listening on podcast will want your contact information. So please share that with us.
So my website is very easy because my name is Nadia, Nadia, and I'm a speaker. So it's Nadia Speaks and nadiaspeaks.com. But I also encourage everybody, I've built a Facebook community and it's called Own Your Network with Nadia. And really in that Facebook community, I've just been asking people to post. This is what I do. I recently had a wedding planner on it, and she said, I'm planning weddings, but obviously everything's been canceled. Here's my contact details. And she's already got 2 gigs for 2021 from the Own Your Network Facebook page. So my goal, my whole aim in life is to say, how do we maximize our overall presence so that we can be more impactful, build strategic relationships? And I like what you said earlier, just in an authentic, relaxed, genuine way, in a way that feels comfortable for us.
Thank you very much. And I know our viewers and listeners will want to contact Nadia. I want to share my contact information as well. Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. So logically, my website is B-I-Z, bizcommunicationguy.com. I invite you to go there, check my website, see what services I have for corporations and for leaders. Give me a phone call. Would love to talk with you about your communication challenges and problems and how I can assist you with them. Any closing thoughts, Nadia, wrapping up what we've been talking about? See, I just made a mistake by.
And you were so flawless, and I don't mind. I go by Nadia.
Does it bother either one of us? No.
I'm thrilled. No, that was so perfect. But really, my final thought is just, and I love this quote, you've heard it, courage is not the absence of fear. It's the taking of action despite the fear. And I know there's not fear, but there's some discomfort with maximizing your overall presence. And through understanding certain tips and techniques, I just urge you to do it and to just become more relaxed. It's very liberating.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Wonderful to have you with us. And thanks to all of you who joined us on the Biz Communication Show. Be with us again next week for another superlative guest.